Hi guys, my name is Andreas, and in this video I would like to code this Frontend Mentor challenge called Free Column Preview Card Component. As you can see, this is a really simple design containing just 3 cards about cars. We could imagine it being for a rental car company or anything similar to that. And yeah, that's all there is to it. We have 3 cards, different colors, they have different content, and they have a responsive design, which stacks the cards on top of each other instead of side by side. So if you'd like to, you can follow me along in this video and we can have fun in building this challenge together. Let's hop into our Figma Design files. First, let's have a quick look around and see what's going on in here. So we have 3 screens, one for the desktop. The second one is also for the desktop, but for the active styles like hover and focus. And finally, we have our mobile view. Zooming in a little bit, we can see that each card is pretty similar. They have an icon on top, a title, some text, and finally a button to learn more about this type of vehicle. Then the only hover or focus states that we have are for the buttons, which is pretty simple. And finally, the only difference for our mobile view is that the spacing between buttons and text is a bit different, a bit less, and the stacking is changed. So instead of having them in a row like that, we have them in columns from top to bottom. So I think that's pretty simple, but also pretty fun to build. Let's dive right into our code. I already have some files created, namely my index.html and my styles.css, which is still empty. Then I went ahead and got my web fonts from Google. One is called Big Shoulders Display, which is used for our titles. And then we have Lexent Degar or Dagger, I'm not sure how this is pronounced. This will be our main body font. We also have some images from Frontend Mentor. They provide them directly by downloading the challenge. Our fav icon, then 3 SVGs for each vehicle type. And of course, our index.html already has our text content, so the title and the body, as well as a basic scaffolding for the title and my chart set, fav icon, so we don't have to do that. Let's get started. I have this set up with Live Server, which is a VS Code extension. So I already have this page served up and it will reload automatically whenever I do any changes. The first thing I like to do is to start writing HTML, and in this case the very first thing is to create a main landmark. We will use the main element, and for accessibility reasons it's always recommended to have at least one main landmark on your page. And in this case, since there's only 3 cards, they will all be inside of that main landmark. Yeah, and for the card themselves, I am thinking about using the article tag. I guess the section would also make sense, but in this case, since it's not a section of a page, but rather a pricing card, a detail card, I think the article is semantically speaking more correct, though I could be mistaken. So yeah, I will just go with that, and I think that works. Inside each article, we will have an image which contains the link to my SVGs. Plus we have an H2 for our titles, plus the paragraph of the text. And finally, for our buttons, I will just use an anchor, and let's create all of these. There was one thing I forgot. We want to multiply this by 3, like so. So I will quickly move all my text inside those articles and then we can go ahead. Alright, next our buttons have the same text, which is learn more, and in VS Code I can select all of these by pressing Ctrl D and type learn more inside, and they will not link to any page. I will just put an hashtag in here for now, since this UI challenge doesn't contain any other subpages or sections. I think that's pretty good. Let's save and have a quick look in our browser. As expected, nothing too fancy, but it works just fine. Next, our images. And in here, I will just select all our images again and go into the images folder. And now for each article, we can select the appropriate image. The first one will be icon sedans.svg, and then we have icon SUVs.svg, and finally icon luxury SVG. What I also want to do is to specify a width and height for each image. Looking inside my SVG, I can see that there is a width of 64 and a height of 40 pixels. So we will apply the same values to our images, which gives us some benefits in terms of performance and layout. And basically, whenever we load the page and the browser hasn't yet downloaded the images, it will pre-assign a space of 64 by 40 pixels for this image. So it's more or less like a blank space, if you will. And this prevents our layout from shifting around, especially our text content, while images are in the process of being loaded. Now, in this case, it's not as important because those SVGs are tiny and they are most likely loaded faster than you can see it. But as a matter of fact, this is always a best practice if you can provide width and height attributes to images. So yeah. All right, I think that's it for the HTML already. As I said, a really simple UI challenge, but the fun part now starts with our CSS. I want to start by creating some variables, and we will create those as part of our root selector. Root means our HTML element here, which is root. And let me paste in some colors, which I got these colors from Frontend Mentor. They provide them when you download the challenge. I am going with HSL colors. You can also use hex or RGB or anything else that works for you. And next, I want to define some fonts. So we have font primary, which will be Lexant Deca or Deca. And we also have font secondary, which will be Big Shoulders Display. And this is being used for our headings. And finally, I want to specify a font fallback. So in case our web fonts could not be loaded, maybe because of network issues or anything else really, we will have a similar looking font fallback, which will be the default system stack. And I will just copy and paste this in here. And of course you have to use that. So as a second value, I will go with my font fallback custom property. Great. The next step, since we now have our custom property set up, is to load our web fonts inside the CSS file. So I will make a copy of my comment, go with fonts, and to save some time, I will just paste my two font face declarations in. Again, one is for Big Shoulders Display, our headings font, and then Lexant Deca for our body font. They are pointing to my fonts folder, and I have those files in here, as mentioned already. And yeah, this is basically a standard font face declaration with font style, weight, and display, and some Unicode range to tell the browser which characters are used by this font. Next, let's copy this comment again, and we will create our base styles. And I also like to start by setting a box sizing of border box to all my elements, including pseudo elements. It's just to layout or writing layouts, including margin, padding, and border, is a bit easier and less cumbersome. Then let me paste in this media query. It is always nice to have this for accessibility reasons. There are some users who are affected by motion, like animations or transitions, and they can get nauseated or have other side effects if too many things are moving on the page. So on some operating systems or in some browsers, there are preferences that you can set to reduce animations, or at least you are telling the website that you would like to see not as many animations as maybe other people. So there is this media query for that preference, and we are looking for that. If a user sets it to reduce, meaning that they don't want to see as many animations or even none, then what we are doing is basically we are disabling all animations and transitions. And with that, we have taken care of some impaired users who might not enjoy animations as much as other people do, like myself. Okay, if I save this and head back to my page, nothing changes. Let's have a quick look to see if everything is loading correctly. Yeah, box sizing border box is set in here, and our variables are also available. So the style sheet is loaded correctly. Now we can write some actual styles. And I will start with our body, which will get a margin of unset to remove the default margin set by the browser. And according to our design, everything is centered on the page, on the X and Y axis. So an easy way to do that is using display grid and then place items of center. This will align my content on the X and Y axis. Right now, it's not doing that as I expected because our body is not as high as our viewport. Our body is as high as the content it takes in. You can see it in our inspector. Instead, we want our body to be as high as the viewport all the time. So we can set a min height of 100 VH. VH stands for viewport height. If I save, you can see now that our viewport is always as high as our browser window. And if I resize, all our content is nicely aligned in the center on both axes. Next, let's say WebKit text size adjust is equal to none. Same with the non-vendor prefixed version, equal to none. This prevents some bugs in mobile Safari with text rendering. And next, I think I will set the background color. If you look in our Figma design, you can see that it's not really visible because Figma uses the same background color for their UI, but it is here. I assure you, the background color equals to color gray light, which we set on top in our custom properties here. Let's save, head back to the browser. There it is. And finally, for our body, I want to set a font, and we will be using the font shorthand syntax, which starts by setting the font weight of 400. Our font size, again, I took this from the Figma designs. If you select the text here, you can see that in the Inspect tab, the font size equals to 15 pixels. So it is 15 pixels. Our line height, let's say, is 1.6. And finally, our font family is primary, like that. Let's save, head back, there we go. Next, you'll notice that the headings in our design, they are using a different font family, and they are also uppercase, and they are white, or not really white, but they are using the same color as the background, which is a really light gray. Let's take care of that. Inside my body style sheet, I will select the H2, which will have a font. In this case, it's 700 for font weight. Let's see, a font size equals to 40 pixels and a line height of 1.1. For headings, I recommend using less line height than for the body because it looks weird on mobile devices, especially when the font or the title breaks and there is so much space between each line. So usually 1.0, 1.1, 1.2 is a good line height for headings. Finally, we have our font family, which is font secondary. It is also text transform of uppercase, and our color was light gray. see how this looks like. Yeah, not too bad. I mean, you don't see it, but it's there. And this looks much more like in our design. So next I would say let's take care of our background colors so we can continue writing our text color and see how buttons and so on look with a proper background. I will copy this base styles comment and set this to cards or something like that. And in here, it's a really simple design and UI, so I can target my articles directly. And let's set a background color of var orange to begin with. Great. One thing that we can also take care of right now is to properly align these in a row. So what I can do is I can, you know what? Actually, no. I will do this later. Let's start with setting the proper background colors first. And in our design, we see that there are 3 background colors: orange, cyan, and dark cyan. And yeah, I think there are a few ways to solve this issue. You could come in and say that the article of nth child, which then is the first one, this one has a background color of orange. We already have that. And we can copy and paste this over 2 more times and modify our background color. So this one is cyan and this one equals to cyan dark. Let's save, go back. And this did not work. Oh yeah. It helps to update the actual selector to match our children. And there we go. We have orange, cyan, and dark cyan. Another way to do this is through custom properties. And I think I prefer this way, which looks like that. We define our background color on the main selector for all articles, but instead of hard coding it, we will say that we use our background custom property, which doesn't exist yet. And then, instead of setting background color on each child, we can set the custom property like so. And it will do the same thing. So basically, our main article uses background color, and this refers to a custom property, but it is not defined until we reach nth child 1, nth child 2, and so on. And in here, we then set background to our colors. There are also other ways. You could use data attributes, you could use inline styles, but I think for such a simple example, doing it this way is more than enough. All right. Next, I want to give some padding, some breathing room to around all of this, because right now the cards collide with our viewport border on both sides, top and bottom. So in order to fix that, I will select our main element, which, remember, wraps around all articles. And let's say that it has a padding of 1 rem. This isn't in the design, but I think it looks much better if we have some spacing all around it. All right, next. In our design, we can see that the paragraph has a kind of light color, though it's not really white. So let's go ahead, select this element and investigate what's going on. So we see that color is pure white, but then there is an opacity of 0.75. And we could do that, we could go with opacity, but I think it's much more elegant to go with HSLA. And in this case, I will select my paragraphs and say that color equals HSLA. And this is the same as our HSL values in here, but we are now also using the alpha channel, which is also transparent, or which you could also refer to as transparency channel. So let's say it's 0%, 100% lightness, and then 0.75 for the opacity. Let's save, head back, and there we go. We have this nice effect of it being white, but also taking some of the background color, so it looks nice on all 3 cards. So let's take care of our margins. We can see that there is this, how can I select it? There we go. We have our title, and there is a margin bottom of 25 pixels and a margin top of 35 pixels. So I will use margin block for that. Margin block defines the top and bottom spacing. So at the top it was 35 pixels and at the bottom 25 pixels. And I have an extension for VS Code installed, which converts my pixel values to rem values by pressing Alt and Z, which I recommend because this plays along nicer with responsive design and fluid typography. So I would recommend using rems or ems instead of pixels for such things. Let's save, and this is looking good. We also have a margin bottom on our paragraphs of 83 pixels. That's really specific. So again, margin block. To the top, we don't need any margin because we already have that from the title, but we have 83 pixels to the bottom, which I will convert again to rems. And yeah. Next, let's jump to our buttons. We have a button with a height of 48 pixels. And a font size is still 15 pixels. The background color is, I think, the same as our background. Let's see. Yes, so we have this light gray as a background. The interesting thing about the buttons is that their text color adapts to our card background. It's kind of transparent. You can see in here it's orange, and here it's cyan, and so on. So this will be fun to solve. But first, let's go with our basic button design. And again, simple UI, I will just target my anchor elements directly. Let's say that we have a background color of light gray. We have a height of 48 pixels. And this again will be converted to rems. We have a padding of 31.5. Let's go with 32. Now it's padding in line because you want the left and right padding, not the top and bottom. So 32. And we have, let's see, let's save that. How does this look? Still not perfect. The height is not considered because anchor elements by default are display in line, and display in line can't receive any height or width attributes, properties. So we will set the button to display inline block so that we can also style it as a block. Then text transform will be not text transform. We have text decoration of none to get rid of our underline. And we also want it to be centered, the text I mean, which means that we can say line height equal to the height of our button, 3 rems. There we go, makes it perfectly centered in the middle. We also have a border radius of 3 rems, again the same as the height, to make those perfectly shaped, rounded sides of our button. Yeah, we want to get this effect of having the same text color as our card's background color. The, I guess, not so elegant solution would be to target each article separately, like article and child, and then the first one, which contains an anchor, and then this will have a color of var orange. Let's save. I mean, sure it works, but it's really not ideal. I don't like to write these many selectors, and it's a bit verbose. Also, what happens if we get new additions, like 3 more cards, and they have different colors? We would also need to add more of those selectors. I don't like this solution, and thank God in modern CSS there is a more elegant way of solving this. I will show it in the browser to better demonstrate how this works. There is a CSS property called Mix Blend Mode, which has quite good browser support now, but it's not really used because it is a bit exotic, I would say. And if we go through those different values, you can see that there are crazy effects on the buttons themselves, depending on what we select. I can't really explain the details. It has to do with how the background and foreground of two elements combine with each other, I would say, like blending into each other. In this case, we have our white button background and our orange or cyan card background. And yeah, this mixed blend mode basically specifies how the browser should display the blending between these two. And in our case, we want to use the lighten value, which looks weird right now because our text is, well, not as we expect. But once I set a color of black, we get our desired effect. It is looking now like shining through, the text is shining through the button. And maybe you might try to say color transparent is the way to go, but this is not, because setting the text to be transparent just means that the white button background is shining through, but not the background behind that, which is our card. So instead, setting the color to black and then a mixed blend mode of lighten will cause this effect. Again, I can't really explain the details about this, but yeah, that's how we can get this shine through effect with as little as CSS as possible. And for this article, let's update our background to red. You can see that it always reflects our background, our card background. So I really like this. I really like this solution. Let's copy our two CSS properties, paste them in, and there we go. We have achieved this effect. Next, let's look into our hover and focus states. They are pretty simple. On hover and on focus, we will do both. The background becomes transparent and we have a border of 2 pixels, and the button text is also white, I guess. Yeah, it's pure white. All right, let's go into our browser, target the hover and the focus. And let's say first we have a background color of transparent and a color of white. You know what? I'm not going to use white. I'm going to use light gray, just to be more in line with the rest of the colors. And I think this looks better with light gray. And let's save. But we will have an issue because our border is not visible. That's because we don't have a border. So we will set a border of 2 pixels and it's solid. And for now it will have the same color as our background. And there it is. Though you can notice that we have one issue. Our text doesn't appear to be centered. It is shifted slightly to the bottom of our button, and that's because we set box sizing of border box. So you notice that we have a height of 3 rems, which was, I think, 48 pixels. But even though we added 2 pixels of a border, you would assume that it's now 52 pixels in height, but it's not. It's still at 48, and that's what this border box is taking care of. If we check this off for a second, if I can find it, yes. You see now we have a height of 52 pixels and our text again is nicely centered. But border box specifies that if you work with paddings, margins or borders, that the element height should not, or also the width, should not really increase, but rather it should go into the inside. So the 2 pixels of border are rendered inside this containment of 48 pixels. But this means that our line height of 3 rems is not correct anymore. And an easy way to fix that is to calculate 3 rems minus the border width that we have, which is 2 pixels. So if I save that, we are now back to what it was before. We have now a centered text. Let's have a look. What's next? We have a let's go into here. We have some padding around of 49. Maybe we can go with 50. Let's go with 50 pixels. And let's go into our card. Padding of 50 pixels. Converted to rems again. All right. And we have a max width, it appears, of 327 pixels. That's a really specific number. I wonder if that's on purpose. But yeah, so let's say we have a max width of 327 pixels, again in rems, and there we go, getting closer and closer. The next thing I would like to tackle is our border radius, and this is a bit special. Let's start writing some border radius first. We have, what do we have actually? Select this group. 8 pixels. Okay. Let's save. All right. Now we have 8 pixels of border radius, but you will notice that this is not really what we want, because there seems to be some overlapping happening here. So yeah, the center card overlaps the first and the last one. There is a bit of an issue here. I think they forgot to adjust the background color or to move this card to the top. But yeah, it seems like the center card is supposed to overlap the first and the last one. The same thing we can observe here. It overlaps the first and it's supposed to overlap the last card. So how can we take care of that? I think yeah, let's try something. For our second article, I want to set a margin block of -8 pixels. Save. That's okay. So now margin block of -8 pixels means that we are pulling in the first card by 8 pixels and the second card by 8 pixels. They are pulled into our center. And in order to make this effect perfect, we will have to remove the border radius from the first card at the bottom and from the last card at the top. So let's write border radius, and if you just write 8 pixels, then this applies to all borders, but we can specify each corner individually. So we start by top left, then we have top right, and finally bottom right and bottom left. The same with our last card. We have a border radius of top left is 0, top right is 0, and then we have both bottom corners with 8 pixels. Getting there, getting closer and closer. One thing that's also not as expected is that our center card is not overlapping properly, because otherwise we would see the border radius here, but instead what I think is happening is that our third card is actually overlapping the second one, because it is the last, or it's the next child in the document object model, in the DOM. So what this means is that the last article overlaps the second one, and the second one overlaps the first one, because that's the order in which they appear in our DOM. So one way to fix that would be to use a z-index of 2, and this should be higher by default than, or it should be higher than the default, and it still doesn't work. So I wonder if we set a position of relative. Yeah, that does it. So now the center card has a higher z-index of, or like the others, which means that it overlaps, it is on top of the other, like the first and the second card, the third card, which gets us this nice effect of having rounded corners and an overlapping effect, so to speak. However, I think I don't really like those overrides, which means that on our base article selector, we have a border radius of 8 pixels, but then we override it again with our custom border radius for the last and first card. Instead, I want to make this a custom property, which has a default of 8 pixels as a fallback. And then we can convert these properties to custom properties, save it. It should still look the same. Yeah, but now we don't see these overrides because, again, our main article is using the border radius that each individual child is setting on its own, except if not, then it is falling back to 8 pixels as a default. And there we go. I also noticed that I didn't set the animation or transition on this button, so let's fix that quickly. We can say that we want a transition of the background color for 0.15 seconds linear, the same for color, 0.15 seconds linear. And I also want to get rid of the outline because our hover and focus states are visible enough, so we don't need a browser outline, which usually looks really bad, in my opinion. Now, if we hover, we have this nice transition, and I can focus over each button and see that they are selected right now. Really like that. All right. I also noticing that for our mobile view that we have, our mobile screen, I set this margin bottom of, what was it, 83 pixels? But actually we don't want that in here. We want the margin bottom of 83 pixels for desktop view, but not for our mobile view. So what we have here is 25 pixels instead. Let's go back into our padding and update it to 25 pixels then. One really slight detail, and if you don't care about that, then just ignore it. But I am kind of a perfectionist, so I do care, is that we have a slightly less spacing between this button and our next card than we have on our second or third card. And the same applies to our icon. Our spacing between the icon and the border of the second card is less than in here. And to be exact, it's 8 pixels less because the center card pulls in the first and third one by 8 pixels. So we are losing the space here. I doubt that many people will notice that, but if we want to get our implementation as close to the design as possible, then we ought to take care of it. So let's go back, and we want to have I think a padding bottom is the right choice here. So we have our default padding of 3.125 rems on all sides. And for our first card, the padding bottom should be the same, 3.125 rems, plus the additional 8 pixels that we are pulling it in. The same should be true for our last card, but in here, instead we use padding top. Let's save. Yeah, there we go. Now, again, it's a really tiny detail, but I care about these kinds of things, so I think it's good to take care of them. And one more optimization I'd like to do is to extract this 8 pixels into a custom property. Because right now our border radius is 8 pixels, and that's also what our negative spacing is depending upon. But let's say at one point a designer comes in and changes it to 6 pixels or 10. So we would need to update all of these values, and also we would need to understand the relation between a border radius and our negative margin. So yeah, I think to make it a bit more readable and maintainable, it's a good practice to come in with a custom property of, let's say, radius. By default, it's 8 pixels. And now we can come in and replace all of our values in here with radius. Okay, almost the same. Ah, yes, the negative margin is broken because we have a value of positive 8 pixels, but we have to negate it somehow into minus 8 pixels. But we just can't put a minus in front of our var keyword, and we also can't do something like that. Whenever you find yourself in a situation where you have a custom property or even just a plain CSS value unit, whatever, and you want to negate it, then you can use calc and perform a multiplication with -1. This will not change the 8 pixels other than negating it. So positive 8 pixels become negative 8 pixels. If I save that, we are back to our design. Let's check our Figma file. I think we are good. This is looking really nice. All right, now there is one more thing to take care of, which is our desktop design, and we want to tackle that next. And I can toggle this mobile view in Firefox and increase or decrease my viewport. Let's see. Let's start with, I don't know, let's say 800 pixels, at which we want to wrap our cards in a row, not in columns. And let's see, yes, our main element should be the right choice here. I will use a media query with a with a min width of 800 pixels. And then we select the main element again. And what we can do now is just say display flags. There it is. Display flags. Why not? I kind of like it. Still some work left, but in essence, yeah, I think that's what we want. Next, you notice that because I think they have different content, their height is not the same, but in the design, our height should be the same. So what we have here is a height of 500 pixels, and we have to restore our padding bottom of 83 pixels. So let's go and copy this selector or this media query. By the way, I can convert this also to rams. And we will select our article and say that it has a min height of 500 pixels. Plus we want to target our paragraphs because now they should have a margin block of 83 pixels to the bottom. Okay. Don't think this worked as expected. Let's see. 525, 509. Min height. Is this 500 pixels? Yeah, it is. Is that a height? 500 pixels. Okay, the problem still is our content is higher than 500 pixels, and so this grows. But I don't want to limit it to 500 pixels because depending on how much text we have in here, it could look weird. You see the padding at the bottom is cut off, and in extreme cases we could even push out our content over the edge, meaning that it bleeds over our element or our element's corner. But 500 pixels is our design, so I think what I will do is just change the media query to be a bit, a bit more lenient in that regard. So I will go with 950 pixels, convert this to rems, same in here. Where is it here? 950 pixels, save that. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's better. Still, our center card is a bit more, a bit higher, a bit bigger, but that's because of our negative margin. So we have to tackle this next, but if I disable it, it will fall in line with the remaining cards. Let's go into our article media query, select the second child, and let's say that our margin should be 0 on top and bottom, and now we want -8 pixels to the left and right to get the same effect, but for a row and not the not the columns. And there we go, looking much better. Finally, our border radius is a bit off because it's still set on the top left and top right corner for the orange card, and bottom right and bottom left corner for the last card. This should change. So we can select article.endChild, and we will set our border radius to be 8 pixels on the top left corner, 0 on the top right, 0 on the bottom right, and again 8 pixels on our bottom left. And we also have a third end child. This will have 0 on the top left, 8 on the top right, 8 on the bottom right, and 0 on the bottom left. Nice. Let's check our mobile. Still looking the same. All right. And let's make sure that our design is actually in compliance with Figma 307. So it seems that our cards are a little bit less wide on the desktop view. 307 instead of 327. I wonder if this is a mistake, but just to be sure, we will update our max width to be 307 pixels, and yeah, so we have this taken care of. Should be a bit wider on mobile. Oops. Yeah, I like that. One last thing, a really tiny detail, but again, it annoys me, so it should be fixed. Our buttons are not aligned because in our mobile view, we had this padding bottom hack to make sure that we compensate for our negative margin, which is pulling in the third and first card. So, of course, for the desktop view, we don't want that. Instead, we want it on the left or right side of the first and last card. So what we will do is come in and say padding padding bottom, and this is restored to 3.125 rems, and let's copy that to make it padding top. And now we want to have the same effect, but on our padding right for the first card, and our padding left on our last card. Let's save. There we go. Much better. You can see here our buttons are aligned, they are on the same height, and we have the same paddings for all cards, and we are compensating for this negative margin that we have on the center card, pulling in the other two. Awesome. I think that's it. I hope you had fun watching me, and maybe you followed along. I also encourage you to try it on your own. There are many different ways to solve this challenge and the others. And check out Frontend Mentor. They have really nice HTML, CSS, and JavaScript challenges for you to solve. I always love building these things. And yeah, with that, if you have any questions, any feedback, feel free to leave a comment below this video. Take care, have a nice one, bye.